Monserrate Shirley was a divorced single mother looking for love.
She knew what she wanted in a man, and she was going to do whatever it took to find Mr. Right.
She found it in the arms of a smooth-talking gambler named Leonard.
He was an important man with money to burn and lots of sex appeal.
The lover's passion would ignite a romance filled with excess and extravagance.
Nice cars, nice clothes. You know, he would burn through easily $10,000 a night.
But it would all be torn apart by an explosive crime.
More than 100 homes were damaged.
One woman said, "I thought this was the end of the world."
Now, follow detectives as they dig through the rubble to solve this twisted tale of lust, greed, and cold-blooded murder.
This was the most complicated homicide investigation ever in the state of Indiana.
November 10th, 2012. It was a quiet night in Indianapolis, Indiana. But the evening peace was interrupted when the city's Richmond Hill neighborhood was suddenly rocked by a massive and deadly explosion.
The best way to describe what I felt was as if somebody had grabbed the house and just violently shook it for a second.
First responders raced to the scene, where they found dozens of homes in flames as stunned homeowners filled the streets.
We have extensive damage to a lot of houses along this area. We got a lot of frantic people back here.
One woman said, "I thought this was the end of the world."
Fearing further explosions, officials focused on securing the area.
Men grabbed pipe wrenches and went around and started turning off the gas valve. Other people ran into houses to pull out their neighbors.
But what had caused the explosion, and just how many people had been injured or even killed by the blast? As firefighters rushed to rescue survivors, stunned homeowners tried to make sense of the tragedy, and none seemed more shocked than 47-year-old Monserrate Shirley. Born in Puerto Rico to a poor family, Monserrate spent her childhood watching wealthy Americans enjoy the island paradise she called home.
She made up her mind that one day she would be like them.
She came to define happiness as wealth and extravagance.
Determined to overcome her humble beginnings, Monserrate set her sights on the medical profession. While other children were out playing, she was busy studying. And in 1990, Monserrate's hard work paid off.
She got accepted into nursing school in Michigan and was thrilled she was going to get to come to the U.S. She was hoping to use nursing school as a springboard for bigger and better things, possibly even med school.
By age 20, Monserrate was well on her way to achieving her goals. But a medical career was only one of them. The other was finding the right man to share her life with.
She didn't want just money in the bank. She wanted a handsome man on her arm.
That was the image she learned to idolize from watching The Tourist when she was a little girl. Success for her meant having a handsome husband to be with and be seen with.
And when Monserrate met a handsome manufacturing technician named John Shirley, he seemed to be the perfect fit.
John and Monserrate had a lot in common. They were both hard workers, and building a family was a high priority.
He helped support her through the rest of her nursing program.
After Monserrate's graduation, she and John got married and settled down in a modest house inside the Indianapolis city limits.
She was a registered nurse. She worked in the intensive care unit at a community hospital on the south side of Indianapolis.
Monserrate soon gave birth to a baby daughter, and for the next few years, it seemed like the couple was living their American dream. But Monserrate soon began to feel her own personal dream wasn't quite complete.
She'd spent her childhood fantasizing about living in a big house, having money and status, and all that goes with it. But she didn't feel like she had any of that.
John worked hard but only made a modest salary, so her home was not the palace she had dreamed of when coming to America.
She really envied the people who lived in Richmond Hill.
She wanted to move over to the Richmond Hill community, which was a bit nicer.
Although John knew the neighborhood was out of their price range, he wanted to please his wife and reluctantly agreed to let Monserrate build her dream house.
She played quite a role in working with the architects in the planning and the building of that house.
Monserrate finally had everything she ever wanted. But the expense of building their Richmond Hill dream home had put a strain on her relationship with John. Monserrate had gone severely over budget while working with the builders, and their mortgage loan was bigger than John was comfortable with. Soon the couple were scraping by just to make ends meet.
They'd had a lot of arguments over money. She had made some really big expenditures, sort of out of the blue.
Building a home had cost the couple everything they had, and it looked like it might cost them their marriage as well. Under the mounting stress and financial strain, John gave Monserrate an ultimatum.
He basically gave her a choice, either the house or me. She chose the house.
John and Monserrate Shirley filed for bankruptcy, and when they got divorced, Shirley took over the mortgage payments.
In addition to the house, Monserrate kept primary custody of the couple's now 11-year-old daughter. But with only her nursing salary, Monserrate couldn't cover her mortgage payments by herself. The bankruptcy allowed her to keep the house while she restructured her debt. No longer at risk of losing her beloved dream house, Monserrate could breathe easy. But with her divorce finalized, it wasn't long before she grew lonely.
She did not have a man in her life, and she perceived that to be something that was important for her.
But then, in November of 2011, 4 months after her divorce, one of Monserrate's girlfriends took her out for a night on the town to get her back in the dating scene. And she immediately caught the eye of an attractive man across the crowded club.
She walked in there with her friend, and Mark Leonard was already in the bar, and they locked eyes, saw each other. She was instantly attracted to him.
But Mark Leonard was more than just a pretty face in the crowd. He was the man that would eventually change her life in ways she could never imagine. Mark Leonard was born in Indianapolis in 1969. A child of divorce, Mark spent his early years struggling for attention. And his desire for the spotlight, combined with his good looks, led to a unique and lucrative career opportunity when Mark was in his early 20s.
He was an exotic dancer at a male strip club and made a lot of money doing it.
He was a male stripper back in the day for the indie playboys. Mark Leonard was always on the make and always on the hustle. He was a fast talker, he was a smooth talker.
But stripping was a young man's game. By his 40s, Mark had hung up his G-string in favor of more stable work as a roofer and mechanic.
He worked as a sort of general contractor. He would work roofing, fixing up buildings, or performing maintenance.
He was good at construction and very successful at it. He made a very comfortable income as an independent contractor working on homes.
But Mark still craved the spotlight, and while he worked hard to build his business, by night he played even harder, becoming a regular at the local casinos.
He liked to have money to flash. He liked to be known at the casinos as being a big spender, and that was something that he cultivated.
He was an important man with money to burn and lots of sex appeal and a smooth line of patter to go with it.
Mark made sure his high roller status was clear to everyone who crossed his path, especially attractive women.
People judge a book by its cover, so he wanted to look sharp. He owned, nice cars, nice motorcycles.
And it was that flashy sense of style that caught the eye of an eager divorcee named Monserrate Shirley.
It took Monserrate Shirley 30 seconds at Crazy Street to buy into the Mark Leonard persona. He's good looking, He's got on the tight jeans. He's got a wad of cash. Monserrate Shirley is taken in by this.
They left the bar that night, and they kept drinking, kept talking, and ended up going home together.
One steamy night of lust became 2, and then 3. By the end of the week, Mark had moved in with Monserrate.
The relationship evolved very quickly, from 0 to 60 within a week.
With Mark, Monserrate had found a passion and ecstasy she'd never known. He knew how to unleash her most carnal desires, and he was a lover who shared her insatiable need for the finer things in life.
Monserrate Shirley fell in love with Mark Leonard and was completely under his spell.
She saw in him someone who would take care of her, someone who could provide for her.
For Mark, Monserrate was the ultimate arm candy. She was petite, vivacious, and exotic. But as the couple's romance deepened, Mark also grew close to Monserrate's 11-year-old daughter, which provided Mark a sense of family he'd never known.
They rode his motorcycle together a lot. They ate out a lot. They would do barbecues together. She was completely in love with him.
Monserrate and Mark couldn't have been happier together. It seemed both of their dreams had finally come true. But it was only a matter of time before it all went up in flames. Their extravagance and indulgence would come to an explosive end that would have deadly consequences.
It was probably the biggest explosion that the city's ever had.
Coming up, firefighters attempt to rescue survivors from the explosion and uncover evidence of a ghastly crime.
Fire investigators began to suspect that foul play was involved.
Monserrate Shirley and Mark Leonard were in the midst of a whirlwind romance full of passion and excitement, until one fateful night changed their lives and their community forever. A huge explosion had detonated in the Indianapolis neighborhood of Richmond Hill.
It was probably the biggest explosion that the city's ever had.
The cause of the explosion wasn't immediately known, and in the moments afterwards, authorities scrambled to evacuate everyone they could from the neighborhood. But for one resident, time was running out.
2 neighbors heard a voice calling out to them from underneath the rubble, calling out for help.
The cries were coming from 34-year-old Dion Longworth, who was trapped inside the flaming wreckage of his home. Firefighters raced against the clock as flames made their way through the basement toward Dion Longworth. But their bravery was no match for the intense blaze.
2 floors of house was on top of him, and firefighters simply could not get him out.
Ultimately, the chief had to make the call to back the firefighters out so that we would not lose the firefighters in the effort to get Mr. Longworth out.
They were forced to watch helplessly as Dion disappeared into the flames that consumed the wreckage of his house.
The hardest thing for a firefighter is to not be able to save a life, and that's something that these firefighters are going to live with the rest of their life and will probably never get over.
Firefighters continued to battle the flames through the night, but it wasn't until the next morning that the scope of the damage finally became clear.
When first light came, then you could actually see the devastation, because you could see how far pieces were flung. You could see houses a block away sitting at an askewed angle.
It was just a sea of debris.
Rescuers also discovered Dion Longworth hadn't been the only casualty. His wife, Jennifer, had also been inside the couple's home, and she died when the second floor caved in from the explosion. But miraculously, only 12 other residents had been injured from the force caused by the blast.
More than 100 homes were damaged. Many of them close to the epicenter of the blast were twisted to the point where walls separated from the structure of the house.
I couldn't imagine, in my mind, the amount of force that it would take to literally move homes and turn them on their foundation.
But what caused the explosion, and where had it originated? Fire and explosive experts analyzed the blast pattern, which indicated that the source of the explosion was the house next door to the Longworths. The house was owned by a local nurse named Monserrate Shirley, who lived in the home with her boyfriend Mark Leonard and daughter from her first marriage.
That Shirley house was the point of origin.
The two other houses on both sides were almost pretty much completely gone, but all you could see was where Shirley's house used to be, and it was just completely flat and nothing was left.
But where was Monserrate and her family now? Thankfully, Monserrate, her daughter, and Mark Leonard hadn't been inside when their home exploded. Neighbors informed detectives that the couple had just left the day before on a weekend getaway.
Some of the neighbors who knew Monserrate Shirley called her and were able to get a hold of her eventually and determined that she wasn't at home.
She talked to one of her neighbors who told her that you have no home to go to, your home is gone.
But while Monserrate and her family were okay, a mystery still remained. What had caused the explosion that destroyed their home and killed two of their neighbors?
When we started to process the scene, we're looking for anything that would give us a clue as to what's going on.
I think the initial thought, at least by some of the firefighters and some of the residents, was that a plane had crashed in the neighborhood because the Greenwood Municipal Airport was nearby.
We were in or close to the flight path of the airport, so it could have been an airplane, but there were no plane parts. It could have been a bomb. It could have been a natural gas explosion.
But experts were soon able to determine that the damage to Monserrate Shirley's house was similar to explosions attributed to natural gas.
You can differentiate a natural gas explosion from a dynamite or something like that because the way the home comes apart. The home just separates at the joints.
This house was totally obliterated. There was nothing left.
Mark and Monserrate quickly drove back to Richmond Hill. The couple confirmed that they'd been gambling at a casino out of town and left her daughter with friends for the weekend.
They were devastated, but felt very lucky to have been spared. They had no idea what had happened.
People said it started at my house. I mean, I don't blame myself for it, but, you know, I feel horrible. I mean, people died.
As originally suspected, gas company officials quickly tried to determine if the explosion had been caused by a leak in the city's natural gas lines.
They checked the main line. They had to find out if it was an accident caused by a leak. They also had to check the service lines that went into the homes.
But they were unable to find any problems that could have led to the blast.
All of those lines checked fine. There were no gas leaks from the city gas companies, and all of that was tested, and everything was within normal ranges.
Somehow, this starts at the gas meter and moves into the house. So is it an accidental? Is it intentional? What happened here?
Then investigators discovered something that convinced them the explosion might not have been an accident after all. A crucial piece of safety equipment had been mysteriously removed from Monserrate Shirley's home.
In the natural gas system of Shirley's house, the step-down regulator was gone.
Step-down regulator keeps too much gas from flowing in the house. Well, something's not right here. This doesn't look good at all.
Fire investigators began to suspect that potentially foul play was involved.
If the explosion was intentional, with two victims found dead at the scene, detectives would find themselves at the start of a homicide investigation. Coming up, arson investigators uncover a potential crime.
Something had been rigged to explode.
She had a front row seat to this murderous scheme.
By November of 2011, the red-hot romance between Monserrate Shirley and Mark Leonard was in full swing.
They were having a great time together, going on trips, gambling, and basically living the high life.
But then tragedy struck. The lovers were on a romantic getaway at a local casino when a massive explosion destroyed their home and several others, leaving 2 people dead and a dozen injured in their upscale Indianapolis neighborhood.
The house was just completely gone, like it was leveled.
Investigators initially believed it to be an accidental gas explosion until they discovered that a gas valve leading to Monserrate's house had been tampered with.
Fire investigators began to suspect that potentially foul play was involved. The regulator had been removed from the house's gas manifold and replaced with a piece of straight pipe.
That told me that that valve was intentionally moved. By whom, I did not know, but it was moved purposely.
The missing valve told police someone had intentionally sabotaged the home, causing it to fill up with deadly gas.
Step-down regulator keeps too much gas from flowing in the house. You put that straight piece of pipe in there, it's game on.
What that means is gas is coming into the house at approximately 8 times the pressure that one would expect.
But detectives knew that gas alone wasn't enough to cause an explosion.
In order to have an explosion, you have to have an ignition source.
They start looking around the home, and they started seeing signs that appeared to be the origin was somewhere around the kitchen area.
In the remains of what had been the home's kitchen, arson investigators discovered clues that pointed to the source of the spark that had set off the blast.
The refrigerator and other appliances had been crushed. The microwave had been twisted from the inside.
A scorched metal canister found inside the microwave indicated someone had rigged the appliance to act as a detonator.
Anyone who's ever left a utensil or aluminum foil in a microwave knows sparks happen.
Investigators reasoned that the arsonist had set the timer on the microwave to provide plenty of time for the house to fill with the right amount of gas.
If somebody blew up this house, how would you do it? Well, you'd have to have a timing device. You'd have to have something that would spark. And all it took was that one spark, as if this was a balloon full of natural gas just waiting to be set off and went sky high.
It was the equivalent of several tons of TNT.
The evidence of an intentional blast of that magnitude meant detectives were no longer dealing with a case of simple arson. 2 people had been killed by the blast, which made this a murder investigation. But while authorities now believed they knew how the fatal blast occurred, who could have done it and why?
It all added up to paint a picture of a premeditated incident. The gas line had been tampered with, something had been rigged to explode, and it was done so in a way that Monserrate Shirley and her family would not be at home at the time.
This looks like an intentional act. Who would have anything to gain from this?
To find answers, detectives questioned the homeowners Monserrate Shirley and Mark Leonard. Monserrate claimed she had no idea who would want to destroy her house, but she said her daughter had noticed problems with the gas line in the past. It was a story she later repeated for news cameras.
She said that, Mommy, it smelled like gas in here, like in the laundry room. She said every time I come from school and we open the garage door, it smelled gas in there.
Monserrate Shirley told police they'd been having some heating problems in the house to the point where they'd had to stay in a motel overnight because the house was too cold. They'd put in a new thermostat to try to fix that.
However, the couple told investigators that when they left for their visit to the casino that weekend, they hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. Police were suspicious, but casino records seemed to confirm the lovers' alibi. They'd been there gambling since Friday evening.
Both Monserrate Shirley and Mark Leonard denied any involvement.
People keep asking me question and question, like I know something, I don't know nothing. I just left my house, and like we always do.
She had no idea what had happened, and, you know, that she had lost everything.
But investigators weren't so sure. As they continued to search through the burned remains of Monserrate's house, they discovered that a few things they usually expect to find simply weren't there.
For instance, where are the couches? It should still be there. Maybe all the fabric's burned off it, but you should still see a wooden frame and springs. There should be wreckage of TV sets here. Where are the TV sets?
They would be a mount for a television hanging on a wall, but they would not be television on it.
Not only was most of the furniture missing, but family photos and memorabilia as well, tipping off detectives that the homeowners weren't telling them the whole truth.
When they sift through the wreckage, they want to see your personal items, the stuff you really hold on to that's important to you. And if they're not here, then somebody must have intentionally moved them in anticipation that there was going to be a horrific disaster here.
In fact, it appeared everything Monserrate and Mark cared about had been removed from the house prior to the explosion, including Snowball, the family cat.
There should be a body of a cat here. There's no body of a cat.
That's because Monserrate and Mark had boarded the cat at a local kennel shortly before the explosion, but they'd arranged for the cat to stay for much longer than just the weekend.
We learned that Snowball was boarded for 3 weekends. That's kind of suspicious to us.
You board a dog because a dog can't take care of himself. Cats can take care of themselves for a week at a time. Who puts their cat and boards it 3 weekends in a row when they're taking off and they're going to a casino?
The 3-week boarding seemed especially suspicious because Monserrate and Mark were only supposed to be gone for the weekend. And when investigators took a look at Monserrate's homeowner's insurance policy, they discovered she had increased the coverage on the contents inside her home, which made police even more convinced foul play was involved.
We learned that within the year prior to the explosion that Monserrate Shirley had raised the value of the property she had in the home up to $300,000.
Detectives learned that the payout for the house itself, combined with the contents inside, equaled a small fortune.
She was going to get $500,000 in total payout, which was very suspicious when you consider that none of the insured items were in the rubble of the destroyed home.
It became evident that most likely this was going to be some kind of fraud.
Coming up, as the evidence begins to mount against Monserrate Shirley, police discover clues that point to Mark Leonard as well.
That conversation kind of suggested that there was an attempt to blow up the house before it actually happened.
And with the lovers facing potential murder charges, will they stick together or turn on one another in court? When Monserrate Shirley fell in love with high roller Mark Leonard, she thought all of her dreams had come true.
Mark Leonard appeared to have a lot of money. One of their primary activities was going to casinos to gamble.
But a deadly gas explosion had destroyed Monserrate's home and killed 2 of her neighbors. And detectives had just uncovered evidence that suggested the lovers had intentionally caused the deadly blast to fund their extravagant lifestyle.
Prior to the explosion, Monserrate Shirley had raised the value of the property up to $300,000.
Combined with the arson investigators' report, Indianapolis police now believed the explosion had been part of an elaborate plot to collect on Monserrate's homeowner's policy.
She had 2 mortgages on her house. It was the total that she owed there was about $225,000.
Despite her considerable debt, investigators discovered Monserrate had been doing a lot of spending recently.
Homicide investigators began immediately doing a forensic investigation into her finances.
She had made some really big expenditures, sort of out of the blue, and she purchased a new vehicle and a motorcycle that were said to be inside the garage of the house when it exploded.
And on her insurance policy, Monserrate had even claimed to own several pieces of rare artwork.
Monserrate claimed that she had a Picasso inside there, which of course she didn't have a sales receipt for or appraisal of or any proof of. So if you're going to claim a Picasso in a suburban house on the south side of Indianapolis, you should probably have some proof that it exists.
But after searching through the remains of the house, detectives found no trace of any high-ticket items, or even furniture for that matter. To seasoned investigators, it all added up to one thing.
The motive is a flat-out insurance fraud scheme. Somebody else is going to pay off on this, and we're going to make an outrageous claim.
But when police confronted Monserrate and Mark about the missing items, they stuck to their story, insisting they had been gambling at a casino out of town when the blast detonated.
They claimed they were away for the weekend and couldn't have anything to do with the explosion.
Mark and Monserrate did give statements denying that they had any culpability in this.
The couple said they were regulars at the casino that they had visited that weekend. And it wasn't unusual for them to send her daughter to a friend's house and board the cat for days at a time. But arson investigators had discovered that a microwave in the kitchen had been used as a timed detonator. So detectives knew the lovers didn't have to be there to set off the explosion.
A flammable material had been placed inside a metal cylinder, which was then placed in a microwave set on a timer.
And when police checked the casino's security surveillance footage, they saw the couple acting rather strangely.
They weren't gambling. Mark Leonard gambled all of 9 minutes. He spent $100 and lost it at a blackjack table.
They didn't appear to be doing anything other than sitting at the bar, so the question became, well, what were they waiting for?
To detectives, it looked like Monserrate and Mark hadn't gone to the casino to gamble, but to establish an alibi. Then, on November 13th, 2012, police received more incriminating evidence against the couple.
We were approached by an individual that was friends with Mark Leonard. He said that Mark Leonard had made several funny comments to him prior to the explosion.
He and Mark Leonard had a conversation on the phone, something about this house was burned down. He was going to collect insurance money out of it.
He was saying things like, yeah, our house blew up, and I'm shopping online for a Ferrari.
But what detectives found particularly interesting was when Mark Leonard told his friends the house would blow up.
Phone records showed this conversation took place on November 2nd.
That meant the call had occurred 8 days before the explosion. And that wasn't all. A former gas company employee also came forward with a story to tell.
In the days prior to the explosion, Mark Leonard had had a conversation with a former Citizens Energy employee at the Gaslight Inn.
The gas employee said Mark hadn't been alone. He'd been accompanied by his brother, Bob Leonard. And their topic of conversation had been telling.
Mark Leonard was asking them about what happens if a house is filled with natural gas. And I believe what the Citizens Energy employee said was that it'll go pop.
To detectives, it sounded like Mark, Monserrate, and Mark's brother Bob had been planning the arson for more than a week. And when investigators dug into Mark Leonard's background, they discovered an even larger motive than Monserrate's 2 mortgages to cash in on the home's insurance policy.
Leonard was addicted to money. He bought a lot of nice cars, nice clothes, and he had allegedly amassed, large amounts of gambling debts. He would burn through easily $10,000 a night.
It was clear to police that both lovers stood to benefit from the destruction of Monserrate's home. What they hadn't counted on was that the blast would kill 2 of their neighbors. Now facing murder charges, the question was, which one of the lovers had been the mastermind behind the plan? It would be up to a jury to decide. 6 weeks after the deaths of Dion and Jennifer Longworth, investigators arrested Monserrate Shirley, Mark Leonard, and his brother Bob Leonard. All 3 were charged with insurance fraud and 2 counts of murder.
Leonard and Shirley were both charged with murder counts and dozens of counts of arson.
They're all facing identical charges. And in a case like this, you're always looking for the weak link. Who's going to hit the exit ramp first? Who's going to cut themselves the first deal?
Detectives didn't have to wait long to find out which of the conspirators would turn on the others. Facing the prospect of losing her daughter, Monserrate reached out to prosecutors with an offer to confess to her role in the crime.
She began to realize she was facing potentially life in prison and, maybe never seeing her daughter again.
Monserrate admitted to taking part in the plot and raising her insurance coverage to commit fraud. But she insisted the plan had been Mark's idea from the beginning. She said they'd only been together a few weeks before he encouraged her to increase the limit on her insurance coverage.
Mark moved into her house and started asking about her insurance coverage and how much she owed on the home.
Leonard kind of brought up committing, arson to collect insurance money. Shirley said she didn't want to go through with it. She thought it was a crazy idea.
Monserrate said Mark eventually wore her down, and out of love for him, she agreed to help carry out his plan.
She said she could not say no to him. She was so in love with him that she wanted to make him happy and do whatever he wanted.
She knew that if she didn't go along with it, he would leave her.
But when it came time to finally follow through with the plan, Monserrate said she'd gotten cold feet.
She was telling Mark Leonard that, hey, this is crazy, let's not do it. Said she offered Leonard her own 401k so they would not have to go through with the plan, and Mark Leonard said it wasn't enough.
He wasn't going to settle for anything less because this was his biggest score he was going to get. I'm finally going to get rich on this. I'm going to be a player. I'm going to be respected.
Mark wouldn't take no for an answer and refined his plan to rig the explosion. But Monserrate claimed she had no idea how extreme the consequences would be.
When she found out that 2 people had died and the whole neighborhood was affected, she was horrified. But Mark Leonard, on the other hand, didn't share the same response. He didn't seem to care.
Monserrate's emotional confession appeared heartfelt and genuine. But while she was willing to make a statement against Mark while talking to police, would she testify against him at a trial? And would a jury believe her story? Coming up, Mark Leonard's trial begins, but Monserrate's boyfriend proves he won't go down without a fight.
They try to paint her as someone who's just as culpable, if not more.
Monserrate Shirley and Mark Leonard's passionate romance had been fueled by a taste for the finer things in life. And as prosecutors now hope to prove, the lovers had been willing to do anything to pay for their extravagant lifestyle, including to detonate an explosive that had killed 2 of their neighbors.
The Richmond Hill case is about greed, and it's about sociopathic behavior, and it's just unbelievable that these people would do this to their neighbors.
Prosecutors spent 2 years building their case, and their best piece of evidence turned out to be the testimony of Monserrate Shirley herself.
Monserrate Shirley had a front row seat to this murderous insurance fraud scheme.
And Monserrate's confession had placed the blame for the explosion squarely at the feet of her lover, Mark Leonard. But prosecutors were worried Monserrate might not agree to testify against Mark in court. So in exchange for her testimony, prosecutors offered to drop the murder charges against Monserrate.
She pleaded guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy to commit arson. And, that would amount to a much less significant sentence.
Prosecutors had their star witness, but would it be enough to convict her lover? When Mark Leonard's trial began, prosecutors used Monserrate's testimony to show that not only had Mark been the mastermind behind the insurance scheme, but he'd been willing to commit murder to achieve it.
The purpose of the trial was to determine his guilt for the death of Dion Longworth and then Jennifer Longworth.
The prosecution painted Mark Leonard as a greedy man who wanted money and would do anything to get that money.
Mark's lawyers didn't bother to dispute the fraud charges, but they insisted that Mark never meant for anyone to die.
He intended for a small fire to happen, and he didn't know what he was doing. He was stupid enough to try to do this, and this went horribly wrong and killed 2 people.
He's not an engineer. He's not an expert. How would he know that blowing up this house in a simple arson was going to kill the neighbors next door? He didn't mean to do it. It was accidental.
Mart's defense attorneys tried to discredit Monserrate, insisting she shared the blame since she had just as much to gain from the destruction of her home.
She was the one who had the mortgage on the house. She was the one who also had financial problems. They tried to paint her as someone who's just as culpable, if not more.
The defense was saying, you jurors should not believe anything she says because she's got a vested interest in this. She's trying to cut herself a deal.
But prosecutors argued that the conversation Mark and his brother Bob had with a former gas company employee proved they knew exactly what they were doing and what the consequences of their actions would be.
If you cause an explosion to your home, you should be aware of a high probability that it will affect neighbors or firefighters and someone could die.
He knew that this much destruction would happen. It can't just be that he thought it was going to be a small fire.
And despite the defense's attempts to discredit her, Monserrate proved to be a compelling witness.
She was pretty emotional during her testimony. Her voice was kind of shaking, almost, especially when she talked about the victims and how they did not deserve to die.
She came off as a distraught woman that was misled by a conniving man.
Monserrate Shirley, left to her own devices, would not have done these things. She participated, she went along with it, she's guilty, but she was not the instigator.
For 6 long weeks, the jury listened to the evidence, but it only took 4 hours for them to return with their verdict.
Guilty. Guilty every single time, every single count. There was no doubt on behalf of this jury.
I remember looking at Mark Leonard, and there was nothing there. He didn't show any kind of shock or any kind of reaction at all. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive sentences of life imprisonment without parole.
The killers had been brought to justice, but for the families of the victims and the hundreds of others affected by the lovers' deadly obsession and greed, no punishment could ever fit the crime.
It's tragic that just somebody wanting to get money ends up affecting so many lives and causing so much damage.
The upheaval in dozens and dozens of lives that was so unnecessary because one man's insatiable need for money and personal glory and one woman who wouldn't stand up and do the right thing.
They were a loving couple trying to make it in America's heartland.
They both had kind of had a hard life, and together they were able to make each other stronger.
They were in love, and they did have future plans to get married.
But their dreams are cut short by a horrific tragedy.
They had been shot multiple times. There was large amounts of blood.
The scene was a slaughterhouse.
The investigation will force police to revisit atrocities from the past.
Southern Illinois was one of the locations for the railroad killer. The community instantly was on alert.
The search for a suspect will lead detectives on a cross-country manhunt and reveal a darker truth, one culminating in the greatest act of betrayal from a friend in need.
She has nobody, and I really didn't have anybody. We just didn't want to lose each other, so we were going to do whatever it took.
Their plan was that they were going to be together in eternity.
These 2 young people's lives were thrown away for what? Nothing. 4 people basically died that day.
I feel so terrible for what happened. I know I should have stopped it. I should have done so many other things.
West Frankfort, Illinois is a quiet town where residents value their slower pace of life.
West Frankfort is a small, tight-knit, charming community, the sort of place you'd want to raise a family.
It used to be a big coal mining area. Most people know each other there.
But on October 19th, 2009, the town's laid-back and friendly veneer is shattered when West Frankfort 911 dispatchers receive a panicked call from a family member of 32-year-old local resident Terry Seebeck.
Terry's aunt called to report that she had spoken with Terry on the evening of the 18th and was unable to get in contact with her on the 19th. She had learned from Terry's employer that she did not show up for work that day.
Terry's aunt tells dispatchers that Terry's live-in girlfriend, 28-year-old Candace Majors, isn't responding to phone calls either.
Candace and Terry are living in Terry's aunt's property. So when they don't respond to her phone calls, she grabs a spare key and heads to the house to see what was going on.
When she approached the house, she noticed there was blood on the storm door.
Then she notices that the doorknob is covered in blood, and she doesn't even walk in. She just calls 911.
When responding officers arrive on the scene, Terry's aunt gives them the key. When they try to enter the front door, the officers immediately encounter resistance.
As I pushed the door open, approximately 5-6 inches, toes came beneath the door, and you can see the blood on them. I was able to push the door open a little further to where I could squeeze my upper torso in and look, and I could see full body laid out perpendicular to the front door.
The scene was a slaughterhouse.
An officer observed a female body that obviously had been shot multiple times, some 4 to 5 times at least.
As police step into the room, they quickly realize there's a second female victim.
She was crumpled between the couch and the coffee table of the residence. There was large amounts of blood in the carpeting and on the coffee table itself.
Police identify the victims as Terry Seebeck and Candace Majors.
And we knew who resided there and who to expect to be inside of that house. Terry's aunt was on scene as we came out of the residence, and I think she saw it in my face when I came out.
As homicide detectives are called in, questions remain. Who killed this seemingly loving couple, and why? Since 2007, Terry Seebeck and Candace Majors had been supporting one another, both in life and in love. Both single mothers, the women had faced adversity growing up in small-town Illinois and had bonded over staying sober for nearly a decade.
Candace was a ball of life. She was a very bright, intelligent girl. Candace had a beautiful smile that lit up the room when she walked in. She has so many positive things going for her, but she got into meth really bad for a while. She would go out and start partying and go on binges for 3 or 4 days.
She would keep a job, lose a job, get another job, kind of just like dead-end jobs. Just really wasn't going anywhere in her life with it.
After losing custody of her 2 children, Candace knew she needed to make a change. That's when she met Terry Seebeck.
Terry was older and wanting to get her life together at that point. She was fighting to get custody back of these children that she had lost. She was just kind of down and out, needing help, and didn't really have anybody because most of her family has passed away or not around.
When Candace and Terry were introduced by mutual friends, they found a kindred spirit in one another.
I think they needed each other just because they both had issues with like past drugs, addictions, trauma. They both wanted to get on a better path and do good for their kids and get that love back that they lost.
They both had kind of had a hard life, and I think they found a mutual bond with each other. Together, they were able to make each other stronger.
They 100% like held each other accountable to always stay clean at that point. So at the beginning of 2007, they became really close, like right after that, and moved in together.
Terry started a job painting with her father. Candace had gotten herself enrolled in school to be a radiologist. She had had a job previously working in a nursing home, and she found that she loved that and that the residents of the home loved Candace. And that kind of inspired her to want to do something in some type of health care or to help people.
Candace and Terry had talked to me on many occasions about, how much in love they were, and they did have future plans to get married.
But now the couple has been found shot to death inside their home. And West Frankfort homicide detectives must determine what happened.
There is 2 women, one of which is laying face down right by the front door. Multiple gunshot wounds to both of the women's head and torso. Terry was shot through her left eye. There were shell casings all over the place.
We knew with the gun that we were looking for a .22 auto or semi-auto pistol because of the way that the brass was ejected into the residence of the house after firing.
Detectives are unable to find a gun in the house, ruling out the theory that it may have been a murder-suicide.
The blood on the front door, on the storm door, on the inside of the exterior door, when you see that, there was a struggle. Somebody was fighting to get in or get out. It wasn't a case of somebody sat down and committed suicide.
I've worked multiple homicide cases, but the injuries to Candace and Terry are the worst that I've ever seen.
Coming up, clues from the crime scene point police toward a serial killer from the past.
There had been a railroad killer that terrorized the area, jumping from rail car to rail car and murdering people.
And the search for the truth will expose conflict within the victim's home.
He did become kind of obsessed with her. It was, I will do anything for this person, for them to love me.
In West Frankfort, Illinois, police have discovered the bullet-riddled bodies of 32-year-old Terry Seebeck and her girlfriend, 28-year-old Candace Majors. As they process the crime scene, detectives try to figure out what the killer's motive might have been.
And began looking around to see if somebody might have gone in to rob them of valuables or drugs, if they would have had those in their possession. We had to cover every angle of who might have done this and why.
There were signs of robbery. Both of the victims' credit cards and IDs were missing.
According to Terry's aunt, Terry's gold Chevrolet Impala is also missing from the driveway.
At this point, our biggest piece of evidence that we're missing would be the vehicle. And it's either going to contain items of evidentiary value or contain the killers. And so that was our primary focus, was to find that vehicle. I instructed one of my investigators to start contacting gas stations, starting with the ones that would have been open in the late hours. If Terry's car was not full of gas and they were planning on fleeing the area and they needed fuel, let's check and see if they did.
While police track down surveillance footage, detectives dig deeper into the crime scene and find problems with the robbery theory.
The house didn't seem to be ransacked. It didn't look like people had really torn it completely apart, like they were searching for a specific item or items of value.
There was a stack of cash in the other room that was seemingly untouched. and there was some expensive jewelry that was left alone as well. There were no signs of forced entry into this home, which led investigators to believe that Candace and Terry let them in.
Detectives conclude that Candace and Terry likely knew the killer. The evidence of overkill suggests a deeply personal crime.
They'd been shot multiple times, and we even found some live rounds, knowing that they must have had a jam with the gun and had to clear that and reload.
With no clear evidence pointing to who killed Candace and Terry or why, detectives contact their families and break the devastating news.
I thought everything was going great. They both were working. You know, the car they had bought was, a nice car. They were paying their bills. They were going to school. They were living the typical normal life. So it was very much a shock. I thought maybe drugs, because whenever you deal with certain people and drugs and things like that, things can go bad.
Anytime you're involved in illegal drug activity, you're going to have some shady connections. So I think that's where most people's minds went to first, is that maybe this was a drug deal gone wrong.
Maybe someone was getting revenge from something a long time ago, or it was like something they owed money to, and it was finally coming back to them. And unfortunately, that's the first thing I thought would happen.
Police immediately begin canvassing the couple's neighborhood in the hopes someone may have noticed suspicious activity.
We started with neighbors to see what they had seen in the area, and we find out a little bit of information on Candace and Terry's residence.
While no one can offer any concrete information to support the drug theory, detectives do find a witness who offers a chilling tip.
One of the neighbors had seen a male subject in the area of the residence of Terry and Candace's house on the railroad tracks early in the morning on the 19th.
The tip sounds eerily familiar to reports that law enforcement had received several years earlier.
Southern Illinois was one of the locations for the railroad killer. The man who jumped from rail car to rail car and popped into communities and created heinous scenes like this. I remember being a child and being at home and being absolutely terrified that the railroad killer was going to come to my home.
Authorities know that the infamous railroad killer had died 3 years earlier by lethal injection. Police must now figure out, are they dealing with a serial killer copycat?
I think that might have been a concern for many people. Was this another railroad killer? The community instantly was on alert.
The citizens were wondering, are they still in our town?
The whole community was shaken, wondering who could have done something like this, because something like this couldn't be done by anyone in this community, right?
We put a description of that subject out over the radio. Citizens listening to the scanner in town found a subject towards the south end of our city that matched that description. Officers were dispatched to the area.
When police locate the man, he appears confused by the claims. With no solid alibi, however, police bring him in for questioning. The man claims he was only out for a nightly stroll, and he had nothing to do with the murders of Candace Majors and Terry Seebeck.
It was just some guy that was on the tracks. He was ultimately ruled out as having any involvement in this crime.
As detectives continue digging into the couple's lives for clues, their friends offer police their first real lead.
They told us that Terry and Candace had a couple that they had allowed to stay with them because they had fallen on hard times and needed a place to stay, and they had been residing with them for a couple months.
Friends identify the couple as 19-year-old Afton Ferris and 29-year-old Michael Shallert.
We didn't find anything in the residence at the initial search, to state who they were, because their belongings were gone, which was concerning.
But friends reveal that Afton and Michael had moved out of Candace and Terry's house on October 18th, after conflict had developed between the two couples.
Afton and Michael Shallert had been accused of stealing from Terry Seebeck and Candace Majors, and then they were asked to leave.
As police put out an APB for Afton Ferris and Michael Shallert, a witness comes forward to report another crime.
We had a subject that came forward and contacted the police department to say that Mike and Afton had been at his residence on the evening of the 18th. They had left after he had gone to sleep, and when he awoke, he realized that a .22 pistol was missing from his house.
Detectives realize it's the same caliber of weapon that was used in the murders of Candace and Terry.
Then when we learned that the gun was missing from there and Michael and Afton had been there the night before the murders, I wasn't wasting any more resources, looking anywhere else.
Coming up, police face a race against the clock to track down their suspects before it's too late.
The vehicle left the gas station, headed towards the interstate, so we were certain that they had fled our jurisdiction.
Less than 24 hours into their investigation, police in West Frankfort, Illinois are searching for 29-year-old Michael Shallert and 19-year-old Afton Ferris in connection with the murders of their friends and former roommates, Terry Seebeck and Candace Majors.
We had learned Afton's driver's license was issued out of the state of Wyoming, and Michael Shallert had ties out Colorado, Wyoming also. So we kind of suspected that that would be a familiar place for them that they would be fleeing to.
Detectives track down Michael's family in Cheyenne, Wyoming, but they say they haven't heard from him. When detectives ask the family about Michael's connection to Terry and Candace, they learn Michael had been close friends with Terry for years.
Friends had a hard time believing that Michael was capable of doing anything violent, especially to Terry and Candace.
Michael is a kind and caring person. He has always been the type to give, the shirt off his back for somebody else.
Michael Shallert is from a good family. He's the oldest of two children, born in 1979. His friends describe him as kind-hearted and compassionate and a good guy who just happens to fall in love really easily.
He had his first kid when he was 15 years old. That, in and of itself, kind of had a huge impact on the trajectory of his life. He was barely able to have a work permit, let alone have to raise a child.
Detectives learned that over the years, Michael had wandered state to state, searching for stability.
He was something of a drifter, someone who could not hold down a job, someone who was looking for someone to take care of him in an emotional sense.
When he landed in West Frankfort, Illinois, he had quickly struck up a friendship with Terry Seebeck, who offered him a place to stay.
She said she was trying to help get him back on his feet. They were together every day, hanging out, doing all the normal stuff that, best friends do.
He seemed to be making a life, and he seemed to be doing really, really good. And then he came back to Cheyenne.
After returning home to Wyoming in 2008, Michael met 18-year-old Afton Ferris. Like Michael, Afton had been searching for a place to call home.
Afton Ferris grew up in the foster system. She was in and out of homes. She ran away multiple times. Despite all odds, at the age of 18, she became valedictorian of her high school class. But unfortunately, after she graduated, she was unable to keep a steady job and was unable to keep a home.
Michael met Afton when she was homeless. She had been kind of going to bars and stuff.
Michael found out that she was homeless and couch surfing, and he immediately offers to take her in, and that's how the two start their romance.
Shallert was incredibly nurturing towards Afton Ferris. He displayed what appeared to be very sincere motives on his part.
He did become kind of obsessed, with Afton. It wasn't necessarily an obsession, like a crazy obsession. It was, I will do anything for this person, for them to love me. When Michael asked me if him and Afton could stay at my house, I told him no. I had just had a kid, and he was not even a year old yet. I'm not going to allow some girl that I didn't even know to stay in my house.
An angered Michael decides to move to West Frankfort, where he had been happy and has a strong group of friends. One of those friends happens to be Terry Seebeck.
Terry welcomed her old friend and his new girlfriend into her and Candace Major's home.
They, took my brother in when he needed a place to stay, and that was pretty nice of them to do that.
But police learned that it wasn't long before tensions erupted between the two couples.
About a month after they had moved in, I spoke with Terry on the phone, and she just seemed really frustrated, saying some of their things had came up missing. Small articles. I think it was probably like some pieces of jewelry or money. It was just small things. She told me that no one else had been in the house.
Terry and Candace believe that this couple has began stealing items from them and that they were going to ask them to move out of their house.
Eventually, they packed up Afton and Michael's things and put them on the front porch and asked them to come pick them up.
I know how Candace is. She's hot-headed, and if she was angry because she pinpointed what they did, she would push them right out. That's just how she was. She would give you one chance, and she was done with you. And I wouldn't blame her.
Less than 24 hours later, Candace and Terry were found murdered. Police know they need to track down Afton and Michael immediately. Less than 48 hours into their investigation, police get a tip that Terry Seebeck's missing Chevy Impala has been spotted on a gas station security camera.
Gas station footage near the crime scene revealed the stolen vehicle pulling up to the pump near the interstate. And guess who happens to walk out? Michael Shallert to pump gas.
There was a person in the vehicle that remained in the front passenger seat of the vehicle. From her body style, it looked like it appeared to be a female.
While the blonde sitting in the passenger seat doesn't ever get out, she does match the description of Afton Ferris.
It's a valuable piece of information because the vehicle left the gas station. We could watch it as it left on the roadway headed towards the interstate, which is only like a block and a half from the interstate. So we were certain that they had fled our jurisdiction.
Detectives speak to gas station employees to see if they have any additional information on the couple.
The clerk remembered Shallert coming in the night before. They remember he was in a hurry, and he used a credit card that was in the name of Candace Majors, but actually signed his own name on the ticket.
Detectives subpoena records for the stolen credit cards, hoping to track the missing couple.
The police are able to watch Michael and Afton travel out west by the credit card transactions on one of the stolen victims' credit cards.
Sooner or later, they're going to not use the card, but as long as they're using it, that's great for us.
On October 21st, 2 days after the bodies of Candace and Terry were discovered, the credit card activity stops in Larimer County, Colorado. When detectives ask Michael's family if Michael has any connections there, they catch a break.
The marshals and Larimer County, Colorado had learned that Michael Shallard had a friend who resided in a trailer park in Fort Collins, Colorado. A surveillance on that residence identified a Chevy Impala, which is the type of vehicle that Terry Seebeck owned. Now that we see that what we're pretty certain would be the vehicle in this trailer park, those departments established a surveillance in there to make sure that Michael and Afton are at this residence. This is kind of a complicated surveillance because you're in a tight-knit community where the same people come and go daily, and they know who should be there and who shouldn't be.
The homes are in such close proximity to each other, it makes it really hard for police to go unseen.
Coming up, as authorities take their positions outside the trailer, they brace themselves for a standoff with two desperate killers willing to do anything to remain free.
This is a double homicide, and they're taking no chances with these individuals who are believed to be armed and dangerous.
Authorities have tracked suspected killers Michael Shallard and Afton Ferris to Larimer County, Colorado. After staking out the trailer park, police visually identify their targets 2 days after Candace Majors and Terry Seebeck were discovered murdered.
The surveillance team was able to recognize Afton come out of the residence, go to Terry's vehicle along with Michael, and remove items from the vehicle and place them in a trash bag. Michael then took the trash bag over and placed it in a trash receptacle outside of the trailer.
That's when the police orchestrate a takedown.
The SWAT team uses a stun grenade to temporarily disorient Michael and Afton.
They made their approach and took both of them into custody.
While Afton and Michael are transported to the local station for questioning, law enforcement conducts a search of the premises and Terry Seebeck's vehicle.
During the execution of the search warrant, in the trash bag, they located bloody clothing that had been worn by Afton Ferris.
They also find the remaining stolen credit cards along with both Candace's and Terry's ID.
In the execution of the search warrant on the trailer, they found a black purse that was Afton's purse, and inside the purse they found a black Ruger 22 semi-auto pistol. This was the same weapon that had been reported stolen to our police department.
In the car, they find a handwritten poem by Afton, seemingly to describe the crime and their life on the run as criminals. The poem was titled Bullets and Weed. They find 2 more handwritten letters from Afton that seem to be suicide notes.
Hoping for a confession, detectives decide to confront Afton first.
Afton, my name is Jeff Tharp. I'm the chief of police in West Frankfort, Illinois. This is Captain Mike Dinn, West Frankfort Police Department.
I'll tell you everything. Just
Okay, so hang on a second.
can you at least just tell me how you guys found us so fast?
When detectives confront Afton about the murders, she immediately breaks down and explains Terry and Candace had been accusing her and Michael of theft.
They're like, well, we just kicked you out because we don't trust you anymore, and we didn't have anywhere to go. Like, I've got no family. He's got no family.
Afton told us that on the night of the 18th, They had been told by Terry and Candace that they were being kicked out of the house. They went to a friend's house, had some drinks, played cards, knew that this friend had a pistol in his house. The friend passed out. They stole the pistol from the house and the ammunition, and they left.
According to Afton, she and Michael walked the few miles back to Terry and Candace's house while they devised a plan to rob the women and flee. They quickly realized it wasn't that simple.
We didn't have any other choice.
Any other choice than what?
Doing that and getting a car and leaving.
To go in and killing them and getting what you could and taking their car. That was the only option that you guys
It's the only
left.
option we had.
Afton admits when they arrived, they convinced the women they wanted to make amends.
And we asked it, can we come inside, to apologize? And we were sitting there, and Terry was sitting next to me on the couch.
There's just the four of you in the house
Yeah,
right now.
there's a couch right here, and Candace was sitting on this couch right here, and I was sitting next to Terry on this couch, and Michael was sitting on the chair. And they were telling us how we were stealing and stuff, and how they went through our room and found the CDs, and it was so trashed in there. Michael went in the room saying, well, I need to go see if there's anything else. And he came back out, and Candace was bitching. He's like, you know what, motherfucker, and he shot her. And she went backwards, and then he shot Terry. She hit the coffee table.
Afton stated that she noticed Candace was at the door and was using her cell phone to call the sheriff's department. Afton said she grabbed a hold of Candace and drug her back into the residence, and Michael shot her some more.
Terry, she was moaning and groaning, and I told him to give me the gun, and I shot her in her left eye.
With both women now dead, they take the women's IDs, their credit cards, a small amount of cash, some cigarettes, and they hit the road.
But according to Afton, her and Michael's dreams to ride off into the sunset together quickly faded.
Afton says that Michael's been an emotional mess ever since the murders, and that the plan was to just commit suicide, that they just wanted to be together, whether that was in life or in the ground. From the moment she walks into the room, she has no remorse and takes no responsibility for what was done.
The reason why I did this is my life has been f***ed up, and just there's nothing for me to live for. I've got no family, I got no friends, it's just Michael, and it's just, I've got nothing to live for,
With Afton's confession in tow, police sit down with Michael Shallert.
Michael's demeanor is very different from Afton's. He tells law enforcement that he never intended to kill anyone, that he just wanted to rob them.
I'm not the type of person to do anything like that. I've never hurt anybody in my life. I just had nowhere to go.
That's right, you do if I keep going. What happened?
We just walked in and she started blaming Afton for stealing some CDs. And me for a tank top shirt. And I just couldn't take it no more, and I had that gun. I just pulled the trigger. I don't even know how many times. Then it got jammed. And after told me to load it, I reloaded it. And she shot a couple times. And then we hurried and got away.
Michael says he and Afton needed the money so they could be together, and that they had no other choice but to do what they did.
I didn't want to lose Afton. I mean, because that's all we've had. She has nobody, and I really didn't have anybody. And we just didn't want to lose each other, so we were going to do whatever it took.
They felt like this was their best opportunity to start a new life together.
Following their confessions, Michael Shallert and Afton Ferris are both charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. News of their arrest stuns those who knew both couples.
I was sick. I was mad. I was every emotion you could have. Makes no sense. There was no reason for it.
I mean, it was surreal. It's something that, you know, you see on TV. Like, you don't think that would ever happen in real life.
Both Michael and Afton plead not guilty, hoping a trial will save them from a possible death sentence.
At the time when they were charged in Illinois, the killing of 2 people made you eligible for the death sentence.
Knowing that the murders were possible death penalty, it was like the moment that I knew life wasn't going to be the same.
Coming up, as one narrative begins to shift, prosecutors question whether justice will be served.
She was trying to make it sound like she didn't want to go against what his wishes were.
And Michael Shallert tells his story in an exclusive prison interview.
This whole thing started because I fell in love with somebody. They didn't deserve it. They were my friend.
In West Frankfort, Illinois, Michael Shallert and Afton Ferris are awaiting trial for the double murder of their friends and former roommates, Terry Seebeck and Candace Majors. Then, in 2011, just before their trials are set to begin, the unexpected happens.
As they awaited trial, the state of Illinois' governor had imposed a moratorium on capital punishment.
Governor Pat Quinn actually makes the death penalty illegal. With the threat of the death penalty off the table, Michael tells his attorney he wants to plead guilty and avoid the trial.
He decided he wanted to change his plea to guilty to the 2 counts of first-degree murder, and he did so.
Nobody knew that he was going to go in there and just plead guilty. But his reasoning for doing that was so that the victim's family didn't have to go through any more than what they had already been through.
So, I mean, he was showing remorse, at least, like I would think human beings would.
At the end of the day, Michael Shallert was sentenced to life in prison.
In July 2011, 2 years after the murders of Terry and Candace, Afton Ferris's murder trial begins.
The prosecution painted Afton as a cold-hearted killer. The defense tries to lay the blame completely at the feet of Michael Shallert.
When Afton takes the stand to testify, she paints a much different picture than the one she had described in an interrogation room.
Afton says that she looked on in horror as Shallert killed her friends, and that she originally lied in her confession tape to protect the man that she loved.
Afton blamed everything on him.
She was trying to make it sound like she didn't want to go against what his wishes were.
She was very stoic, no sign of much emotion at all, even when she attempted to muster some up and really couldn't.
The jury ultimately sides with the prosecution.
Afton Ferris was found guilty of both murders. She was also found guilty of armed robbery and home invasion, and she was sentenced to life in prison plus 120 years.
I was relieved, but I was sad because these 2 young people's lives were thrown away for what? Nothing. 4 people basically died that day.
If I could, turn back time 11 years, I mean, maybe I would have allowed my brother to stay in my house. Maybe it wouldn't have happened.
I believe that if the two of them hadn't got together, that Candace and Terry would still be alive.
I would want to say I am disappointed that I have not got the chance to see what Candace might have become. I guess I would want to tell Afton and Michael that I don't understand what you did. You threw your life away, but I'm not going to let that dominate my life. I have to keep going and just cherish the memories I do have.
From his prison cell, Michael remembers Afton 10 years later and how their all-consuming romance triggered a deadly betrayal among friends.
This whole thing started because I fell in love with somebody. It was like love at first sight. And every day I just got more and more obsessed with her. I mean, there's always going to be something in my heart for her. She was a big part of my life, you know, and that was the most intense love that I ever had. I feel so terrible for what happened. I think about it every day. I accept all the responsibility for my part. They didn't deserve it. They were my friend.